Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Ammaar bin Saleem. Welcome to another episode of Outloud with Ammaar. This is an episode that's very close to my heart for two main reasons. The first is this is the finale of season four, like the 10th episode of this season, and the second is that I'm going to be talking about a topic that is very close to my heart, and that's education and getting into higher education institutions. But before we go on and talk about the topic in far more detail, I'd like to go over the episodes that we have done in this season. We spoke about Pakistan's IT sector. We had a conversation with the CEO of DevZing. We talked about how overall exports from Pakistan can be increased, can be improved with IT services sector playing a major role in that. Then we spoke about US political situation and how the economy will be changing, what the US people want, and how the new US president, Mr. Donald Trump, is going to affect the overall economy in the US and what's the public pulse like. And then we spoke about employability and how HR interviews can be cracked the best. Then we spoke about digital content creation, global creator economy. Then we spoke about changing trends in global higher education. And then we had a podcast, a very special episode on laughter beyond borders, where we had Mr. Arjun Pratap Rana join us from India. And we spoke about how laughter and comedy can bring the two nations together. The last episode was with Ms. Aisha Faruqi, who is the Pakistan's ambassador to Ireland, current ambassador, and we spoke about Pakistan's brand image across the world and what should be done to enhance or improve the position that the image that Pakistan currently has. And today we're going to be talking about Canada as a higher education destination for students pursuing their or thinking of pursuing their higher education outside Pakistan. So when I was collecting the data as to how many people have left Pakistan in the last few years, I figured that in 2024, approximately 790,000 people have left Pakistan for numerous countries. And in 2023, ICF Monitor found that approximately 5,000 students are currently enrolled in Canadian educational institutes. And there could be a number of reasons as to why people are pursuing education outside Pakistan or leaving the country. For sure, top of my head, I have economic instability sometimes, and there's political uncertainty, and then there's the promise of a better economic situation outside Pakistan. And of course, things are now improving in Pakistan as well. So let's see how how the trends change. But I'm very privileged to be conducting today's conversation with someone from Columbia College. I'm very grateful to have been joined by Mr. Anthony Culver, who is the student recruitment manager with Columbia College. And Anthony, as I remember, you also are teaching there as well, right?
Exactly. So I work for Columbia College. I also teach for a different institution in business studies. It's quite a fun combination.
Right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. Welcome to Outloud with Ammaar, by the way. Should have started with that.
It's amazing. We've been in conversations for a while, and finally I get to sit down with you and really dive into some topics which I know are close to my heart. And I see that replicated from your side and just the passion about education and not just about it as a industry or helping students go abroad, but really diving into that nitty-gritty of how do we actually find the right program for a student? How do we share information in honest and transparent manners that support students and next generations?
Right. So, Anthony, before we delve into very technical questions on student recruitment and what the Canadian universities actually hold for them, and if the students are best fit for them or not, how do you evaluate the overall economic situation that generally is seen? Because for institutions in Canada, I'm sure you would see a lot more interest coming in from South Asian countries and developing nations compared to developed countries in Europe and in the US and in the north of the world.
I think every student starts looking for international education because of different factors. And it depends on their micro factors, like their home, where they are within a certain country. So if we talk about Pakistan, for example, I've had the privilege of traveling to Karachi to Lahore and Islamabad, these are quite major cities, quite international, and quite robust. So there's fantastic economic opportunities that I've seen, I've witnessed in all three of them. A student even from one of these cities might decide to study in Canada so that they can bring back different perspectives on education, different perspectives on some of the topics that you were just talking about, like marketing, like AI, like disruptive informations, or even just about health and wellness with that laughter episode back into their home society. I think
Mm.
that's incredibly important. And for some students, it is the economic driver. Um, they see better future potentials in a different country. So it really depends not just from which country a student is coming from, but also I would say from what situation within that country a student is coming from. But for Canada, the education system is very highly regarded in terms of quality and opportunity, in terms of how it's designed around professional experiences. And it's Canada. It's a very safe and stable country. It's a place, of course, I'm biased. I'm from Canada myself, but it's
Like
a
one should be.
wonderful place to be. Yeah.
I think that's the same situation. And it's pretty much the same with me whenever it comes to talking about Pakistan, and it's just still I've got to be positive about the situations. But Canada, of course, enjoys a pretty remarkable image and position when we see the countries and when we see the appetite of students pursuing their degrees and careers and even living in foreign countries. So Canada enjoys a pretty significantly important or a very favorable situation on the whole. But how do you evaluate the situation in the backdrop of the soaring inflation? Because that is also one of the concerns that we generally see from students who go out and pursue their higher education. Because to be honest, most of the students who go out to countries like Canada, UK, US, I think most of them don't want to come back permanently to Pakistan. They want to
Mm-hmm.
because it's a huge investment. So they generally apply for their PR, they'll apply for their citizenship. But in the backdrop of how everything is changing suddenly so swiftly across the globe, how do you see the Canadian economic situation or the political situation changing?
This is quite an interesting question because because of the timing of everything. The ruling party in Canada has just changed leaders. So Justin Trudeau has stepped aside, and we have Mark Carney as our new prime minister. It's expected that he will go to the governor general and request that an election is called quite soon. But if you look at his resume, he's been the really the chief of the Bank of Canada, and then he switched over to managing the Bank of England for quite some time. And finally, he's come back to Canada and he's put his hat in the ring to become our prime minister. So to have a politician with that level of experience watching over economies, supporting
Mm.
economies, and doing so in a way that isn't driven by ideology, but is driven by an idea to support the people in the country. I think that's
Mhm.
critical, and I think that's going to go a long way. Um, there are quite a few global phenomenons happening right now, whether we talk about the different conflicts, physical or tariff, that are going to impact everyone. But for students, I would say one of the most important things is both to look at the short term. You're coming for maybe a 2 year program, but hopefully a 4 year bachelor's degree. But
Mhm.
if you are looking to shift countries, or if you are looking to make Canada your permanent home, I would hope that we also look at the 20, the 30, the 50-year expectations of where Canada will be at that time. And to me, I've always said sometimes we go through rough patches. I think every country does. But if we're looking 50 years in the future, I am very confident that Canada will be still a safe country, a stable country. Our economy will have grown, Inflation will have come here and there, but overall, we'll be in a
Mhm.
very good position.
Inflation is happening in every country in the world, as you've mentioned, and the situation sometimes, of course, deteriorate for countries. But generally, what I think what one should be looking for whenever they're making a very long-term decision like this, as to the country that they will be making a career in, or raising a family in, or staying in, I think that's what counts the most: the 30, the 40, the next 50 years of how the economy is going to be of the country. And yeah, so with that, let's move on to a very relevant question. So, generally, what we see that the most popular destinations for students pursuing their higher education outside Pakistan include US, UK, and Canada. Of course, there's appetite for Canada too. So, how do you evaluate or how do you compare the Canadian education system for higher education with that of the UK and with that of the US? What are its strengths? What are some of its weaknesses?
Mhm. So with this one, I won't be pointing out weaknesses as much as differences. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it's maybe it's because I'm Canadian and somehow it's in our genes to be polite. Um, but the major difference is that when we talk about education in North America, and I'm generalizing between the US and Canada right now, it's a lot more replicated of what professional life will look like. What I mean by that is during a semester, the marks are going to be divided between the final exam or the final project, yes, but generally that would be between 20 to 30% of your marks. And the rest, 70 to 80% of the marks will be distributed between projects, midterms, different quizzes, presentations, anything and everything
So it's not just
during
going
the
to be the
semester.
performance in the exam.
Exactly. You can't just cope up and do your level best on the exam and walk away from that. Um, and it's very
Maybe
much
that you are
like
a
the
brilliant student,
professional.
you didn't do well in your one exam, and then of course you got to repeat
No,
this, repeat the course.
yeah. And to me, this is, when we go into our offices, our workplaces, no one just hands us a final project after 4 months and says, well, this is why we pay you, do this. No, they'll ask us for presentations. They'll come into our offices and say, oh, what's going on with X, Y, and Z project? And it's very much the same if you think about it. There's pop quizzes, there's little presentations, there's major presentations, but this is what we do in our professional life. So why wouldn't we build our educational system to mimic and to really model after that kind of environment? And that's what you're getting out of North American education. UK is much more of that traditional. The exam comes at the end. So if you are that type of student who likes to cope up, maybe UK is your home.
I think the what the world is now realizing, and even in Pakistan, what we're seeing more is that there is more uh, appetite for such programs or degree programs where you're not primarily judged on the performance in one exam per course or two exams per course.
Mm,
People now also realize that there are multiple milestones that are there when you have to achieve something or when you are to complete your program or course. And I think it also allows for students to better manage their stress, better manage their,
yeah,
I think it allows for a bit of a student life and personal life balance, which is generally what
completely.
students, which is of course what students should be looking for, because shouldn't just be exams and just be academics. And there's a lot many things that you learn from co-curricular activities, from life outside education, from life outside the job.
Yeah, I know for myself, I probably learned as much about who I am and how to conduct myself outside of the classroom when I was studying as I did from inside of the classroom. And I'm glad I got opportunities on both sides. I think they kind of work together, but the experiences outside of the classroom are massively important. It's why I'm in this conversation right now.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. And so You guys get a lot of students from different countries. What are some of the challenges that students generally face when they come to you guys? Like, and how do you guys provide them assistance that they require? And what sort of assistance do you provide them?
I I answer this question the same way almost every single time. The challenges international students face, regardless of where you go, are almost always going to be outside of the classroom. Exactly what we just talked about, like those important things about having friends, about making social networks, about figuring out where to buy the food that reminds you of home, about how to conduct yourself, how to manage your time, all of these little things that like stack up and become so important for a student graduating high school. We're talking about a kid who's 17, 18 years of age. Have
Mm.
they learned how to do their own laundry? I love walking into classrooms being like, hands up, if you know how to do your own laundry. Almost no one puts their hand up. Hands up if you know how to cook, if you know how to, like, if you've lived by yourself before. And of course, when we're talking about students coming from bachelor programs, the hands typically stay down. For more mature students looking for masters, it's a different scenario. But for those young students, that support, both in the classroom but outside of the classroom, becomes the determination of success. Because I think I've met so many students in Pakistan and they're brilliant. They're hardworking, they're driven, there's ambition, you can feel it. It's exciting. I love having these conversations and I want that to continue. It's not about the IQ, it's about the EQ. It's
Mm.
about stepping into a different city and stepping into a different culture. When we talk about Columbia College specifically, small class sizes, maximum 30 students in a classroom. It gives you time to ask questions of your prof. And it's not always just about what is being taught, it's about asking questions about the expectations for a project. It's about asking questions about um, how best to prepare for an exam, what to understand will be useful when we present information or not, how to conduct ourselves. And then on the other side, it's about all of these things that we talk a lot about. Like North America loves to talk about work integrated learning programs, co-op, right? It's paid internships, but we talk about them so much. And we build up this idea that somewhere in your third and fourth year, Microsoft, Google, whichever companies, Deloitte will
Companies.
come to your university and hire you as an intern for 4 months. Well, it's competitive. Those jobs are not just handed out like candy. You have to be building yourself up. And so at Columbia College, we also have part-time internships. They're paid, of course, but they're easier to achieve and they're really designed to give a student education on that professional culture as well as get them that first job on their resume in North America, in Canada. And so it allows them to start to build up their profile so that when they transfer into third year in a university, and they compete for those co-op jobs. Now they have something exciting to talk about. Now they also know how to go through an interview process. Um, and so we've talked now about classroom sizes, about work integrated learning, but also just having an institution designed with the intention of helping students integrate
Mm.
themselves into Canada, with the idea that our model as Columbia College is find your voice. Figure out who you are. We're going to be the canvas that you get to paint your life on. We're going to be there. We're going to be helping you in those conversations, but you get to figure out your narrative. You get to figure out what's important to you. And we are excited to be in that conversation with you.
So you kind of facilitate their journey. Um, and as we've spoken about how how competitive the market landscape is going to be, landing good internships, landing good jobs with blue chip organizations, with like organizations with of the stature of Microsoft and IBM and Apple, Tesla, what have you. So, how would you evaluate this change that we are now at least seeing some of it in Pakistan, at least? That there's a bit of a tilt in the focus. Students are more inclined towards vocation, are becoming more inclined towards vocation based training programs, learning hard skills or going for short courses compared to proceeding with traditional university programs like 3 or 4 year degree programs. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you evaluate this situation, and is it the same, is the rhetoric the same in Canada, or the appetite or the focus or the inclination towards pursuing a full-fledged bachelor degree program is still the same?
I was thinking about this question, and the first thing that came to mind was my mother and her expectation that regardless of whatever I did in my life, I would earn a bachelor's degree. You know, mothers and family expectations are always there. Um, they might show themselves differently. I've had too many conversations now with colleagues in Pakistan, but like families play a part. And so the expectation, I think, in Canada is that, yeah, we will get post-secondary education. For my family, for me, it was going to university and getting a bachelor's. Um, but Canada is one of the most educated countries in the world. And I think the big focus is not if you get a 4 year bachelor's degree or 2 year technical program, but that you do something. Um, and we'll see trends kind of shift back and forth depending on the years, depending on what's interesting, what people are talking about. And sometimes it's also about how the economy is doing and what profession is most in demand. Um, I would say, though, if a student's coming to Canada, really be quite intelligent with what you're looking for. If it's a 2 year program, it needs to be very focused on a technical program or a technical area. If it's a 4 year bachelor degree, I always recommend this. And Columbia offers 2 year programs which feed into and transfer into third year at a whole range of different Canadian universities, which is a phenomenal opportunity. But I think for me, as long as a student is being intentional and upfront with what they actually want and what will that give them later on in life, that's the most important factor for me.
And I think universities play a huge role in that, because even I remember when I was in my university, I started my bachelor program with the business school, but then I moved to the School of Education and Communications. So that sort
Mm,
of realization kind of happens during the course of the degree program, and I think it kind of works out the best that you don't have to declare your major, or you don't necessarily have to know who you're going to be or who you are in first year of your induction at a university. It can happen over the course of a few semesters, and as you go on, I think you make better sense of how things work out for you and who you are. So and with that, so how would you introduce the Columbia College on the whole, and what's the history of the college, and what are some of the disciplines in which different degree programs are being offered, and also
mm.
what makes it different compared to other colleges in Canada?
Uh, I'm gonna start off with a really fun story and one that made me excited to join Columbia College. Because College started back in 1936. We're the second oldest educational institution in operation in British Columbia, my province. The only older one is UBC. But for Columbia College, 1936, it's the height of the Great Depression in Canada. Students are dropping out of high school so that they can work, right?
Okay.
Because they want to earn money, help their families, start providing for their families. Really, that was the demand, that was the pressure. And so you had students dropping out of high school, and that was starting to compromise their futures. Exactly 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road, they wouldn't be able to really progress in their careers. They would be locked into this position because they didn't have a high school graduation. So the question that they were facing is, do we help our family today and we eat, or do we try and get through high school and we'll have a better life if it works out? And these two women came up with this extremely simple idea. And at that time, it was revolutionary. It was, no one has ever really implemented it, done it, considered it seriously. These two women offered high school courses in the evenings. That was it, right?
Executive
And
programs.
today, exactly, super simple idea. But at that time, it was massive. No one had really ever tried this. So now we had those same high school dropouts still working during the day, still earning money during the day, but now they were studying classes during the evening. They were able to graduate high school on time. Sometimes it took them a little bit longer, but they were able to actually do both of their goals simultaneously, satisfying their needs and moving forward with their lives. Now, Columbia College, we have shifted with the times, and I think it's been one of our biggest strengths is that we look at what students are being challenged by, where students are really facing difficult situations, and we work to address them. In that same idea as these two women, small changes. And these small changes have big impacts. So for us, just as you talked about with that transfer from Pakistan, from any other country into Canada or into a different country, I mean, it's about making sure the student understands the transportation system. It's about making sure the student understands what the expectations, the academic expectations are, and how to conduct themselves. It's about helping a student get their first job, because that first job is always going to be the most important and hardest to get. And so for Columbia College, we do all of those things amazingly well, and we offer 2-year programs, associate degrees in a range of subjects, everything from computing sciences and
Mhm.
engineering to psychology, business, communications, your subject. And of course, my favorite, political sciences, what I studied, but in a whole range of different subjects. And then we want our students to transfer to a university. We want them to do third and fourth year at a university and graduate from there with a bachelor's degree. This university could be UBC, it could be Simon Fraser University, it could be a number of universities in Canada, but that's our goal.
So Anthony, you spoke about associate degree programs. So what I understand is that once somebody is done with their high school or A level, like once the 12th standard is done, then students go for their associate 2-year degree programs at Columbia College. Is that so?
Exactly. It's really, we're still talking about a 4-year bachelor degree. We're just breaking it up into two different sections. So a
Right.
student will graduate high school, they'll come for a 2-year associate degree with us, and it's because they want those extra supports, and then they'll transfer from there into third year in a university. So it's still a 4-year bachelor program. We're just kind of cutting it up into much more manageable bite-sized pieces.
So it's a different model that you guys follow, and I'm sure that is the same thing that happens in the US as well. Or not sure if it happens across all states there, but I think some of the states do allow for associate degree programs. But generally, I've not seen that happening much in Pakistan because once you're done with your high school diploma or FSC or A level with University of Cambridge, you generally enter a university for a period of 4 years, or even if you want to take a transfer, that would be from one university to another, and there's kind of no intermediary college, between your
Mhm.
high school and your university. So how does that work out generally? Because it's a new model for even for me.
It, yeah, it's a new model. I feel like for a lot of people, you're not alone in that. Um, with this model, though, it works exceptionally well for students who are shifting countries, who are shifting into different educational focuses, right? In many different high schools, students aren't focused on studying engineering. They'll talk a lot about it. They'll talk about some of and study some of the different disciplines within engineering, but there might not actually be an engineering course. So to be able to step into a college which has small class sizes and really an amazing ratio between academic advisors and students, such as Columbia College, this is an opportunity to try out a subject, to understand the subject, and to see if it actually fits you as the student, and then to progress. And there's some connotations that come with it that I think parents hold and create for themselves. And they think that, oh, this is a college. Why is our child going to a college instead of a university? Our child is smart. Um,
Hmm.
and it requires quite an honest conversation of what is the goal of the student? What is the goal of that child? Where do they want to progress to? What's their actual dreams? Because over the last 3 weeks, I've had this amazing opportunity to visit the campus of University of British Columbia, right? Top three university in Canada, one of the top 50 universities in the world. And I met four students studying currently at UBC who all started at Columbia College. And the four that I met are quite specific because they won a scholarship from Columbia College that we provide to 16 students every single year. And it's worth $30,000 Canadian for a student who transfers into third year at a Canadian university. And so these four students were one of those. They had won this $30,000 scholarship to continue their studies at a university. But when I was speaking with them, each one had a very interesting perspective about how Columbia College shaped their current studies, whether it was because of those internships helping with them with a co-op, because of certain instructors giving extra time, extra feedback on how to prepare. One student, actually an engineering student, said it's easier to be a student in UBC than Columbia College because of how Columbia College really sets it up and sets that expectation of how to be successful. So for very different students from different corners of the world coming through Columbia College, each one was exceptionally grateful, not just for that scholarship. I mean, $30,000, it's a nice amount, but more so to the culture, the quality of education, and really the environment that Columbia College provides to its students.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm sure, and I think that's quite an impact. And also, as a student recruitment manager, I think it's very satisfying to know that your students who once were at your college have landed a placement at some of the at a very high ranked university. When we see it as University of British Columbia is a very esteemed university in the world, and we see a lot of students have showing a lot of huge, I mean, a pretty significant interest in pursuing their undergrad or grad programs at UBC. And with that, I mean, I think it just makes sense that to understand how Columbia College, of course, you've already spoken about that, how Columbia College kind of supports and scaffolds, provides scaffolding. But then we also want to know the different universities that the Columbia students are studying at in Canada, besides UBC, of course, in the last 2, 3 years.
Yeah. I mean, for students, they have their own perspective, they have their own goals, they have their own desires and their own programs that they want to be studying. So for some of them, UBC works out amazingly well. It's got the rankings, it's got the reputation, it's fantastic. I also spoke to some students studying at Simon Fraser University, um, and also Kwantlen Polytechnic University. Those were the three different campuses that I visited recently to speak with transfer students, but we also will help students transfer into Capilano University in
Hmm.
Vancouver, and so quite a wide range of institutions within Vancouver, but we'll help students transfer outside of BC, outside of this province, into University of Alberta, McGill,
Right.
McMaster, University of Waterloo. So for
That these are all
us,
the
the
big
goal
names. It's
is
not just
exactly, it is the big names, but it's to match that student with the right institution for them.
So
That
there's a lot
is
of career
where
counseling
we
at play
win.
as well, student counseling.
Exactly. Yeah. We're not just trying to make sure that students get their GPA, but to explore their passions and to actually think intentionally, reflect, very focused on where do they want to graduate from. That's
Mhm.
important for us.
Right, right. And when it comes to students, the ones who don't want to pursue a university degree program after their associate degrees.
Mhm.
So, what about is it easy for them to find employment in Canada? Does the system kind of support that, or they don't
Mhm.
generally? I don't know if there is a study on that or not, but they don't. Do they do well compared to the students, or how well they do compared
Well,
to
so
who
I
go
would
for?
always, yeah, I see where you're going with this question. I would always recommend a student to complete their 4 year bachelor's degree. And I think if you talk to anyone at Columbia College, they will share similar opinions where an associate degree is a wonderful start. It will help a student start their career. It will help a student figure out what they want to do and graduate with. And it's a really wonderful step. Um, and we've seen students graduate with it and start careers. And they've gone off into different directions and done quite well for themselves. But based on really the the career expectations and what the market is looking for, but also the most recent IRCC policy changes, we want students to be doing a bachelor's program. It's going to
Mhm.
allow them a better opportunity to secure immigration or not immigration, permanent residency and a postgraduate work permit is going to help them later on with their career. So for yourself, I mean, you're a content creator. That's quite amazing. You're a small business owner. Um, Education for you in that role is different than what education is required for in someone who's trying to step into Deloitte or one of these big companies.
Mhm.
In one of these big companies, you're going to need it for your bachelor degree. So
Exactly.
I think that's always important to remember.
And you spoke about IRCC and immigration and residency and citizenship. And of course, I'm sure the students that you see coming in from, countries like ours and India and Vietnam and Nepal and Sri Lanka, the developing countries, basically, generally the students
Mm,
who pursue these programs at colleges like yours, they will want to stay in the same country, Canada.
mm,
So once they're through with their associate degree programs, does the Canadian system allow them to apply for immigration or for some sort of permanent settlement, or do they have to go through a 4 year program first and then find employment, spend a certain number of years, and then stay? So how does the whole
mhm.
idea come into
So
thing?
recently, the Canadian education system and IRCC, or the immigration policies around international student, went through somewhat of a, I would say, maturing year, right? There was a lot of change, and
I'm sure the shoring is a decent way of saying something that's not very uplifting or supportive of what IRCC does.
yeah. I know everyone has their own perspective on what it will do and how it was rolled out, and there's definitely, yeah, some choice words probably said in different rooms. But for the majority of it, it was a positive thing because what it did was it realigned international education with job opportunities.
Hmm.
That was critical. And so, a student coming into Canada now, I know there's a lot of confusion, a lot of questions and concerns about the different policies. But the good thing is that what they forced was that every single institution is
Mhm.
now thinking about what the job opportunities are for their students. And on a
Right.
macro level, for Canada, we are granting visas to students based on how many jobs we think and where the jobs we think will be in 4 years'
Mhm.
time. So it's really tying those two areas together. And what it means is that for a student thinking about Canada, those values that we talked about, you know, before this, about being safe, about being secure, stable,
Yeah.
about being a great
About being a
opportunity
lucrative country to be in.
economically, yeah, those remain.
Hmm.
We're just slightly twisting the policies around getting into Canada to make sure those continue. Um,
Right.
and so when we talk about future career opportunities, I mean, they remain there for students who study at Columbia College, do a paid internship, transfer to a university. I think there's great opportunities to be in Canada.
I think it just makes sense to realign your immigration, your settlement policy with the jobs that you currently have, or what you anticipate of how you anticipate the industry on the whole is going to be. And in the backdrop of what you've just said, what, in your opinion, are the industries that are currently thriving or are going to be thriving in the next 20, 30 years? Because, yes, I completely agree. The immigration policy on the whole has to be aligned with what sort of jobs, what sort of industries are going to be booming in a certain country, and in this situation, Canada. So what's your opinion on how do you see the market moving?
Canada, I mean, we were founded on resource management. Back when we were established as a country, I will use that term, although back when we were granted independence, our economy was largely based on resource extraction. That was lumber, that was really furs, and that was fish, right? That was our economy. And will those resources have changed? We still extract a lot of lumber, um, but now there's a lot of mining and resource extraction in different areas. That is one of the pillars of the economy still. So if you're looking at import export as well as engineering, these will always be in demand in Canada.
Right.
Those will be the backbone of our economy forever. Um, and the other area that I would say is incredibly stable is agriculture. And that doesn't just mean being a farmer. Um, Again, import export is massive. We are, I think, one of the biggest exporters of lentils into
Okay.
India specifically. And I'm
Right.
sure we provide quite a bit into Pakistan as well. So next time you have dal, it might have actually come from Canada.
From Canada.
Um, but those industries are massive for us. They are very stable. They will always be around. And then if we start talking about future trends, I mean, computing, IT, technology in its various different streams,
Hmm.
everything from cybersecurity to software engineering to maybe generative AI
Hmm.
and different cross
Facets of
sections.
it.
They're, of course, they'll be around. They're growing in Canada. We have our own industries, our own homegrown companies that are doing some really interesting things there.
Even with traditional industries, I was listening to one of your ministers, and they said that they have a huge base of huge reserves of oil. that they were previously exporting. They probably still do to export to the US to the tune of 100 billion US dollars, which the US then markets well and sells across the globe, and then is an industry of about 300 billion US dollars. I think the opportunity is the opportunity is pretty expansive when it comes to
Mhm.
Canada for students of the whole world. And I've got to ask, I mean, what do how do the Canadians or you guys would genuinely responded to uh, President Trump's statement on Canada being or becoming the 51st state of the US?
Um, that is a great question. Um, I think there is a lot of diplomatic answers that I could give. There's also a lot of answers that I have given behind closed doors, but Canada is a proud and independent country. I think as short and as simple as that, we are Canadians and we will always be Canadians.
And I think this is the best answer.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
very much. Thank you.
Okay, so this brings me down to my last question for Columbia College. How does the Columbia College generally, is seen in the community in Vancouver? And I mean, how does it contribute to the overall life, to the community, and to the society on the whole in Vancouver and on Canada on the whole? How does it work out?
Mm, it's a fun question. I mean, we're a nonprofit society-run college,
Okay.
which puts us in a very different position. We're not a publicly run government college or university. We're also not private for profit. Um, we're quite unique in that circumstances, and I I think Columbia College plays a massive role because a few years ago I heard this quote that not every Canadian is born inside of Canada. And what it means is that when a Canadian or when an individual does decide that their journey needs to transition into Canada, some of them will choose education as that pathway. And we're there. We're helping students to, again, find their voice.
Hmm.
It's as much about education as about understanding yourself as an individual. And we do that through, yes, our own setup, our own focus on quality education, about accessible education, regardless of financial needs, regardless of really quite a few different things, trying to make education accessible. Um, but also working with partners around and in Vancouver, such as the YMCA, such as
Hmm.
Mosaic, such as, I mean, there's quite a diverse group of nonprofits who work with us. And I had this opportunity to speak with one of our student alumni who
Hmm.
worked for a nonprofit around food security and food justice, right? And so a lot of his work had been during and post COVID. He was
Hmm.
working with this NGO and he was dealing with issues that were affecting recent immigrants into Canada. He was dealing with issues that were affecting homeless populations in Vancouver and across Canada. He was dealing with questions that were affecting the average Canadian, if we can say
Right.
that. And at the end of his research, at the end of his internship with this nonprofit, he actually went to City Hall with them and was one of the co-presenters. We're not allowed institution. We don't have the rankings. We don't always have the branding, but through many different ways, we are as impactful as any one of our neighbors in terms of how life is governed in Vancouver, how society moves. And given that we are the second oldest institution in Vancouver, we hold quite a, I would say, honored position.
Yeah, sure. And not every organization in the education sector has to have a whole, well-crafted corporate image. Not everybody
Yeah.
I think it's not about affordability as it is about, what your focus is at times. Sometimes you can afford it, but you don't want to do that. You don't want to overly
Mhm.
brand your organization, and that's perfectly all right. And especially when it comes to an organization being a not-for-profit organization or a non-profit organization, then I think the marketing and the communication generally changes. Not necessarily will these organizations be the ones who are vastly, widely known across your country or your whole region. But they, as you have mentioned, will have a huge impact on how the ecosystem is evolving evolving not only in that particular region but the country on the whole. So, and as you mentioned, you saw so many of your, not so many, but of course, it's a pretty decent number that you saw at UBC, and then you can see your
Mhm.
impact through placements at all the great names that you've mentioned of the different universities in Canada. And I'm sure that you guys are doing a brilliant job over there. And with that, thank you very much, Anthony, for your time. I think that the students who are going to be watching our podcast when it goes live, I think they're going to really enjoy the conversation. I hope so. And they're going to find it useful when it comes to their decision making with regards to how they want to plan their future outside their countries. And if Canada is one of those destinations, then how Columbia College can be a vital, intermediary between their high school education and their next university program, and maybe to a very permanent settlement in Canada and opportunities that emerge out of that.
Thank you so much, Amar. It's been fun. I know education is my profession, but it's also a passion. So to come on and speak with you, I've really enjoyed myself. Thank you.
Prayers all mine, Anthony. Thank you very much. And thanks to all of you guys who've been watching our podcast Outloud with Ammar. So if there's more information that you require with regards to Columbia College, their website's URL is pretty simple. It's columbiacollege.ca, and you can also give me a text if you want more information on that, and I can put you through to Anthony. And thank you very much. I'm going to see you with the first episode of season 5 coming very soon. Take care. Lafis.